Hey, I'm Hank, and this is Herd of Turtles, where I look back on the original black and white Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic books, which were written and drawn by the Turtles' creators, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. Today I'm looking at the Raphael Micro Series number 1, which was a one-shot that came out in 1985 between issues 3 and 4 of the regular series. My apologies, I couldn't find nice shots of the original black and white pages, so I'm forced to use pictures from the edition, which was colored by Tom Smith's Scorpion Studio. It is a beautiful coloring job, but I enjoyed bringing you the original turtle art in black and white, like it was originally printed. I could have just put this video in black and white, but again, that's not what the original pages looked like, so we'll make the best of what we've got, which ain't bad at all. So let's go hang out with Raphael, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, in Me, Myself, and I. You had it, Mike. Friend or no friend, you've got to go. This one-shot starts with a bang, or rather a slam, of Raph sailing sideways into a pile of boxes. He's sparring with Mikey, and despite what many of us would assume, Mikey is dealing with Raph pretty easily. These days, everybody thinks of Raph and Leo as the two hardest hitting turtles, with Donnie as the brainier one and Mikey always joking. But in this opening scene, we see Raph doing his best to take down Mikey, and failing. This is where I learned my first real martial arts terminology. A reverse punch, a roundhouse kick, a dragon punch. Mikey seems pretty cool and collected, while even before things start going bad, Raph is on the edge of losing his shit. Now, I grew up as an only child, but I've seen siblings interact, and I've seen that point where a younger, bullied sibling loses their shit. And that vaguely seems to be what's happening here. Not that Mikey is a bully necessarily, but you can tell he's getting under Raph's skin as they fight, chiding Raph and calling out his moves as he makes them. Pride goeth before a fall, buddy. Raph takes a hard fall and comes back up with a wrench in his hand, looking to brain Mike, and that's just what he's about to do when at the last moment, Leo grabs Raph's hand. Raphael, have you lost your mind? You could have killed Mike if you'd hit him with this. Raph immediately comes out of his angered haze, stuttering an apology, but Leo just tells him to go cool off. And Mikey, we can see, is clearly freaked out, asking Leo, "Did you see his eyes?" Once he's out and up above the streets, Raph wonders what's wrong with him, and notes that Mike is his best pal. That's a neat addition, the idea that Raph and Mike have something special, a little separate from the others. Raph goes for a run and questions himself. His violent impulses, his temper, and eventually we leave him sitting on the edge of a rooftop, apologizing to a brother who isn't there to hear him. Meanwhile, not far off, we pan into the apartment of a young man. He's maybe 20 years old and is working out while watching at least 3 TVs at once, all playing variations of cop dramas. This is Casey Jones. Now, as a kid, I read this comic and I understood the motivations of Casey Jones. I wanted to clean up the city, get the scum and dirtballs off the street. But reading it now, it's hilarious how fucked up this actually is. Casey is putting on a mask to go out and physically assault people to assist the police. In the modern context, he reads like a right-wing lunatic. And of course, that's kind of what Casey is. He's a guy who just wants to hurt people. I think we get a more fleshed out character from Casey as the years go by, but in this first appearance, again, as a kid, I loved Casey Jones, but as an adult, Casey reads like a hyperactive kid version of Rorschach from The Watchmen, which, again, is kinda what he is. A few hours later, Raph happens across a young woman being harassed by a couple of thugs. Hey, a couple of thugs who just happen to be Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, putting themselves into their own book. Raph kicks some butt and tells the guys to get lost, and then attempts to return the woman's purse, but she wants no part of Raph's help. Up above, Casey Jones watches the scene go down and is happy to see a fellow funny-looking green crime-fighting defender of justice, but then is angered to see that Raph's just letting the guys go. Raph hears the sounds of a fight, and worrying that the thugs have attacked somebody else, he goes to check it out. He's relieved to see that it's just a masked man beating the shit out of the two thugs, and Raph figures they just picked on the wrong guy until he notices that Casey isn't letting up. He's not just stopping the punks, he's gonna kill him. Raph jumps at Casey, telling him to cool it, and that's when the two of them start going at each other in a fight that will basically last the rest of the entire issue. We get a lot of statements that start in one panel and finish in another. This gives each page a real sense of pacing, so you can get a feel for how the action is flowing from each shot and each moment into the next. The two guys trade a few blows. Raph thinks that he's put Casey down, but Casey comes back with a golf club, stunning Raph long enough for Casey to take off. Eventually, Raph wakes up and realizes that he's come across a true lunatic on a rampage who thinks he's a superhero. And Casey is on a rampage, putting his clubs to some car stereo thieves. I don't know if that's still a big deal today, but I remember, back in the 80s, that it seemed like car stereo thieves were all over the place, at least in fiction. Not just in comic books, but also in movies and TV shows. Thugs were always stealing car stereos. You'll also notice that Eastman and Laird are putting advertising for their own books in the stories of their own books, with Casey running past a billboard which simply reads Eastman and Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's a cute gag, if not a little weird. Raph manages to catch up with Casey and their fight resumes. Some of the art in this issue specifically reminds me of Richard Corbin, a respected comic artist, perhaps best known for his adult stories published in Heavy Metal magazine. Corbin did some covers and issues for the classic Mirage Studio Ninja Turtle comics, so we know that Eastman and Laird really looked up to him. It wasn't something I was aware of as a kid, but I sure can see the influences now. Raph tries to explain to Casey that there's such a thing as making the punishment fit the crime, and Casey calls Raph a bleeding heart, and then kicks the turtle in the face. Casey runs off across the street and into what seems to be a large park. As a kid, I just assumed it was Central Park, and I still think that now. Raph knows he needs to follow Casey across the street, but also can imagine how upset Leo would be if Raph let himself get seen. Eventually he says, the hell with it, and charges across the road, quickly changing from a ninja warrior stalking in the shadows to a dude yelling, Yahoo! As he jumps across the roof of a car. Seeing Raphael, a guy guesses that he's one of those fleshy-headed mutations, secretly planning to take over the planet, which he read about in Blaze magazine. I have no idea what any of that means. But now, in the big, dark park, Casey and Raph are hunting each other, and despite Raph's training, Casey keeps getting the drop on him. Finally, all subtlety is put away and the guys just have an all-out punching brawl, of which, eventually, Raph emerges as the victor. Casey can't believe it, that he was defeated by a little green freak. After an entire issue of fighting, the guys have one page where Raphael says that it's crazy to try to kill people just for stealing car stereos, and Casey admits that he is crazy, but he's pretty sure that Raphael is a little crazy too. Raph admits that he has a temper, but says that he's trying to be better, whereas Casey just lets himself run wild. Off in the distance, there's the sound of a mugging taking place. The guys decide to take care of it together, Raph warning Casey that he'll be watching him. And the final page is Casey and Raph shouting, "Let's get 'em!" as they charge to the aid of a person in need of help. As a kid, I really liked Casey Jones. He was fun and wild, and he was the young male human who was a friend to the turtles. I could see myself as him. As an adult, Casey is awful. He feels like he was nearly meant to be a villain, and it's crazy that he and Raph become such good friends, and that Casey became such a vital part of the team. Casey's kind of weird and a jerk, and his politics, his social outlooks, are questionable at best. It's kind of hilarious that Raph is lecturing anybody on not killing, considering that when we met him in the first issue, he was driving his size straight through the bellies of a couple of guys not unlike the ones he stopped Casey from killing. In the first live-action Ninja Turtle movie, Casey Jones was played by Elias Koteas, who did a pretty good job. He's been voiced and played by a few other actors over the years, notably Chris Evans, Marvel's Captain America, and Stephen Amell, the CW's Green Arrow. That's two superhero actors. Weirdly, those two guys kinda look a lot alike, now that I think about it, though neither one of them reminds me at all of the Casey Jones in the comic book. Personally, I don't know who the hell I'd get to play Casey Jones. He's gotta be young and kind of insane. I could almost see like a young Christian Slater, but he doesn't have the physicality, he's more of a smartass. The balance of goofy and violent is tricky to pull off. Maybe a young Kevin Bacon? Raphael was the first of the Turtles to get his own standalone issue, just like he was the first to get his own scene in the Turtles' first issue. Raphael is always somewhat the favorite child of the Ninja Turtle family. He's the intense one, the dramatic one, the violent one. Narratively, it seems like he's the easiest character to write a story around just because Raph is always troubled and always getting into shit. Rereading this issue, I wouldn't have expected Casey Jones to become such a vital part of the mythology. He feels like a one-off villain, not a character who was meant to stick around and wind up becoming one of the Turtles' best friends. I specifically always think of Casey and Raph as a duo, and I like the idea of the Turtles having relationships and partnerships outside of the core team of the four brothers. This issue is a little melodramatic in places, but like the previous issues, it doesn't feel like anything's being played for humorous irony. Those first few pages of Raph losing his temper, nearly hurting Mikey, and then grappling with his own mistakes are pretty emotional, at least for a Mutant Ninja Turtle story. Again, I do think it's pretty ironic that Raph is here to defend street thugs and moralize about not killing, given that Raph has killed maybe 24 people in the past couple of weeks of story. Though I guess pretty much all those were in the first issue, the Turtles didn't kill any people in issues 2 or 3. I love transversing the city with Raph and Casey. The book does such a great job of making you feel like you're right on the streets of 1980s New York City. So that's Raphael number 1. Another great goddamn issue. I'm Hank, and this has been Herd of Turtles. And now you have. Go on, get.